The champagne was too cold, the laughter too sharp, and the ice in my brother's eyes, as he looked right through me, was a glacial spear to a heart I thought had scarred over. We were at the St. Ives Charity Gala, a symphony of black tie and calculated philanthropy in a Manhattan ballroom that glowed like a golden cage. For 5 years, I'd been dead to him. After our parents' fatal crash, the will was simple: the family estate, the venture capital firm, the legacy, split between us. But Miles, the golden boy with the silver tongue, produced a codicil, witnessed by a lawyer who conveniently retired to Belize, leaving me with nothing but a toxic plume of debt and a reputation as a litigious, unstable mess. He married Elora Vance, of the Vance Pharmaceuticals Vances, and ascended to a stratosphere where I was just an embarrassing smudge on his past. I'd rebuilt from ash, running a small but respected art restoration studio in Brooklyn, a quiet ghost. He'd found me just weeks before, pleading, "Leo, I need you. There's a hostile takeover brewing at the firm. The board thinks I'm a lone wolf. If they knew I had family, a partner, it would stabilize confidence. Come to the gala. Just be my brother again." The raw need in his voice was a drug I'd craved for half a decade. I bought the tux. I walked into the lion's den. For an hour, he introduced me as an old friend from college, Leo. I played along, the knot in my stomach tightening with each lie. Then, across the crowded room, I saw her. Genevieve St. Ives, the matriarch, Elara's aunt, a woman whose eyes missed nothing. She froze, her porcelain features etching into a mask of shock. Then dawning, predatory recognition. She cut through the crowd like a warship, her gaze pinning me. "Leo." Her voice, cultured and sharp, silenced the immediate chatter. "Leo Prescott, Martha Prescott's son, the art prodigy. We met at your mother's gallery opening years ago. You disappeared." Every eye turned. Miles went pale as the marble columns. Elara's polite smile became a rictus of horror. Genevieve took my hand, her touch like chilled silk. "But of course you're here. Your family." She turned her terrifying smile on Miles. "Miles, you dreadful man. Why ever have you been hiding this fascinating brother?" The silence was a physical weight. In Miles's panicked eyes, in Elara's furious glare, I didn't see guilt or shame. I saw the cold calculation of a secret about to be exposed. They hadn't just disowned me. They had erased me to steal what was mine. And now the one person whose opinion they valued above all others had just resurrected me. The humiliation was a public flame, but beneath its heat, a colder, harder truth crystallized. His plea for help was a lie within a lie. He'd brought me here not for family, but to control the narrative one last time. To keep me close where he could manage the fallout of his own theft. And that was the moment I knew, the real revenge begins now. The aftermath was a study in silent violence. Genevieve St. Ives's interest was a spotlight that burned away Miles's carefully constructed fiction. He recovered with the slickness of a seasoned performer, wrapping an arm around my shoulders in a grip that felt like a grapple. "Aunt Jen, you've uncovered my surprise." I was waiting for the right moment to reintroduce Leo properly. A private family toast. His laugh was too loud, too hollow. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of stifled whispers and poisoned glances. Elara Vance Prescott was a masterpiece of contained fury, her elegance now reading as lethal frost. She spoke to me only when necessary, each word a precisely dropped icicle. "Leo, you must tell us about your work." The pause was an indictment. I played my part, the modest, slightly overwhelmed artist, feeding them harmless details about pigment and varnish, all while watching the fault lines spread across their perfect facade. Miles drove me home himself. A tense silence filling the leather, scented interior of his luxury sedan. The rain had started, painting the streets in slick, neon reflections that bled across the windshield. "You handled that well," he finally said, not looking at me. "Genevieve is a powerful ally. Her backing could secure everything." "Everything he stole," I thought. "Why did you really bring me, Miles?" I asked, my voice quiet. He was silent for a long moment, the wipers beating a rhythmic thump, thump like a failing heart. "The board needs to see unity. Stability. You're my heir, Leo. On paper, at least. That still means something. He pulled up to my modest loft building, a world away from his Park Avenue fortress. We'll talk tomorrow. We have a lot to restructure. He meant he had a lot of lies to reinforce. As I got out, he leaned over. It's good to have you back, brother. The words tasted like ash. I stood on the wet pavement, watching his taillights disappear into the rainy gloom, feeling not warmth, but the chilling certainty of a trap being set around me. He wasn't offering reconciliation, he was maneuvering a liability. My loft was a sanctuary of a different life. Canvases, the sharp, clean smell of turpentine and gesso, the quiet solitude I'd carved from ruin. But now it felt like the forward operating base of a covert war. I poured a finger of whiskey, not to drink, but to watch the liquid cling to the glass. The encounter had given me one critical advantage: Genevieve St. Ives. Her recognition was a key, but to what? Research was my first weapon. In the blue glow of my laptop, I dove into the world of the St. Ives and Vances. Old money, pharmaceuticals, a tapestry of intermarriages and board seats. Genevieve was the power behind several thrones, a collector of art and people. Her late sister, my mother, had been a close friend, a fact Miles had buried along with my inheritance. The hostile takeover Miles feared was led by a rival firm, but the more I dug, the more it looked less hostile and more like a justified coup. Prescott Ventures was bleeding. Bad investments, suspicious liquidity issues. The money from my parents' estate, my half, had been a stopgap, siphoned into failing projects. Miles wasn't a victim, he was an arsonist trying to hide the match. A week after the gala, Miles summoned me to Prescott Ventures. The office was a temple to austere wealth, all glass, steel, and silent, anxious energy. His corner office viewed the city like a possession. We need to formalize things, he began, gesturing for me to sit. Elara was there, a silent sentinel by the window, her presence a chill in the room. A position, Vice President of Strategic Outreach. It's mostly ceremonial, but it puts you on the letterhead. It was a gilded cage, a title without power, designed to make my presence official and manageable. And my share? I asked, keeping my tone neutral, curious. Miles and Elara exchanged a glance, a fleeting, intimate language of conspiracy. The estate is complex, Elara said, her voice like smoothed marble. Tied up in trusts, illiquid assets. Miles has been managing it, preserving it. A sudden division now. With the company under pressure, it could trigger a collapse. You'd lose everything too. They were offering me a salary, a role, in exchange for continued silence on the Capitol. It was a bribe wrapped in a threat. I let a mask of reluctant understanding fall over my face. I just want to be part of the family again, I said, the lie tasting bitter. Miles's smile was triumphant. He believed his performance. Believed my need for him was my ultimate weakness. My office at Prescott was a beautifully appointed closet with no real function. I used it to listen. I became a student of the ecosystem, the nervous CFO, the arrogant head of acquisitions, the sycophantic assistants. I made a show of being the artistic, slightly naive brother, asking innocent questions that revealed veins of tension. I cultivated Ruth, Miles's long-suffering executive assistant. With genuine kindness and respect, a currency she was starved for. Over terrible coffee in the break room, she let slip fragments. The midnight meetings with lawyers, the frantic calls to a Swiss bank. Miles's volcanic temper when a name was mentioned, Krajan. I stored it all. The true turning point came not from the corporate front, but from the personal one. Elara invited me to a family dinner at their penthouse. It was an interrogation masquerading as hospitality. The apartment was a cold masterpiece of interior design, every object placed with militant intent. Their young son Oliver, a quiet boy of 7, was presented like a prop and then whisked away by a nanny. During dessert, Elara leaned forward, her diamond necklace catching the light like a cluster of frozen tears. Leo, we're so glad you're integrating. But for Oliver's sake, for the family's stability, there are parts of the past that should remain past. Your difficulties after your parents died. She meant the depression. The grief I'd drowned before finding sobriety and purpose. a period Miles had weaponized to paint me as unfit. Some documents from that time, if they were to resurface, could be misinterpreted. She continued, her eyes unblinking. We've taken the liberty of securing them. For your own protection, of course. It was a threat, clean and direct. They had fabricated or procured something, a fake psychiatric evaluation, a forged IOU, to discredit me if I stepped out of line. I nodded, feigning grateful relief. I'd prefer that chapter stayed closed. Inside, a cold fury solidified. They weren't just thieves, they were architects of a false reality, willing to gaslight and destroy to maintain their fiction. After dinner, Miles, emboldened by wine and perceived control, asked me to see his study. He wanted to show off a newly acquired painting, a minor Dutch master. The room was dominated by a vast desk. As he pontificated about brushstrokes, my eyes caught on a sleek, modern device on his desk. A digital voice-activated recorder, the kind used for high-fidelity meeting minutes. A light on it glowed a soft, steady red. It was always on. A paranoid man's insurance policy. My heart began to hammer. If Miles recorded everything in this room, what conversations had this device captured? The planning of my disinheritance. Conversations with the lawyer who fled to Belize. Instructions to manipulate the trust. Getting the recorder was impossible, but accessing its cloud storage, that was a different battlefield. I needed a hacker, not a thug. I found my weapon in a shadowy figure known only as Cipher. A digital ghost recommended, through the art world's darkest back channels. A person who traded in secrets for astronomical fees, funded by the last of my own carefully hoarded savings. The transaction was done in a basement bar in Chinatown, no names exchanged, a burner phone and a packet of cash passed. The target: infiltrate the secure, private server hosting Miles's encrypted audio files, and retrieve everything from the last 5 years. It was a Hail Mary. A desperate gamble with my last resources. While Cypher worked in the digital shadows, I played my public part with increasing deftness. I used the vice president title to access the charity circuit, leveraging Genevieve St. Ives's continued interest. I spoke at a museum fundraiser about art restoration, as a metaphor for healing legacy, a speech that subtly echoed the themes of theft and repair. Genevieve approached me afterward, her gaze appraising. You have your mother's spirit, and her sharp mind. She would be proud of the man you've become. Despite the obstacles, hung in the air loaded. She knew, perhaps not the specifics, but she sensed the rot. Sometimes, I said, holding her gaze, the most valuable restorations are invisible. You don't repaint the masterpiece. You remove the layers of grime and varnish that others have applied to obscure it. A slow, approving smile touched her lips. An alliance, unspoken but potent, was forged. Cipher delivered. The files arrived on an encrypted drive, a treasure trove of my brother's paranoia and crimes. Hours of board meetings, phone calls, domestic arguments, and then I found it. A file dated 3 weeks after our parents' death. Miles's voice, clear and cold, and another, the oily, compliant tone of his personal lawyer, Alan Frick. Miles, the codicil needs to be airtight. Leo's emotional state makes him a risk to the estate's integrity. His tendencies. Frick. The witness is taken care of. The debt we're seeding into his name will make any legal challenge look like a desperate grab. He'll be bankrupt and discredited before he knows what hit him. Miles, good. My wife's family cannot have any association with scandal. He disappears. The Prescott legacy is mine to rebuild. There was more. Conversations with Ilera about pressuring appraisers to undervalue the art I was meant to inherit. A screaming match with a board member, where Miles admitted to using family capital to cover a catastrophic trading loss. The recording was a symphony of betrayal, each track a movement in the concerto of my destruction. Now I had the weapon. But unleashing it raw would cause a chaotic explosion. Collateral damage that could include innocent employees, the company my parents built, even young Oliver. This wasn't about chaos, it was about surgical, devastating justice. I needed to force a confession, a public unraveling that would leave no room for spin. The annual Prescott Ventures shareholders meeting was the stage. It was where Miles would present his turnaround, his narrative of triumph over adversity. The night before the meeting, I invited Miles to my loft. I told him I'd found some of our father's old business journals he might want. He arrived alone, arrogant, sure of his dominion. I poured him a drink, the same whiskey from the night of the rain. To family, I said. He drank, smug. I led him to my desk, where a laptop sat open. I found something else, Miles, in my own archives. An audio diary of Dad's. I clicked play. The room filled with our father's voice. Warm and strong, from a birthday message he'd once recorded for me. And I know you and Miles will steer the ship together one day. My two captains. Share the burden, share the glory. Miles's face softened for a fraction of a second, touched by a ghost of the boy he'd been, before hardening again. Sentimental, he sniffed. Isn't it? I agreed softly. Then I switched the audio file. His own voice from the recording filled the quiet loft. He disappears. The Prescott legacy is mine to rebuild. The color drained from his face. He looked at the laptop, then at me, his eyes wide with a primal, terrified shock. The mask shattered completely. What is this? Where did you get that? From your study, Miles. From your own recorder. You've been documenting your crimes for years. My voice was calm, a flat lake over a depthless chasm. The codicil is a fraud. The debt is a fabrication. You stole from me. You erased me. He stumbled back, his arrogance collapsing into frantic denial, then rage. You have no idea what I've sacrificed. The pressure I've been under. Elara's family, their standards. You would have ruined everything with your artisanal fragility. You didn't just steal my money, Miles. You stole my place, my name, my nephew's uncle. I stood facing him. Tomorrow at the shareholders' meeting, you will stand up. You will announce your immediate resignation as CEO. You will publicly renounce any claim to the shares you took from me, and outline the process for their return, along with restitution for 5 years of dividends and interest. You will cite personal reasons and a desire to pursue other opportunities. Or what? He sneered, a last vestige of bravado. Or I release this recording and the dozens of others to the SEC, the press, and every member of the St. Ives and Vance families. Elara's standards will be the laughing stock of the social register. You won't just be bankrupt. You'll be in prison for fraud, and she will leave you so fast the sonic boom will shatter what's left of your precious crystal. I leaned in close. This is the only deal you get. Resign with a shred of dignity, or be annihilated. The shareholders' meeting was held in a grand hotel ballroom. The air buzzed with expectation. Miles stood at the podium, impeccably dressed, but he looked like a man facing a firing squad. Elara sat in the front row, her face a beautiful, unreadable mask. I sat near the back, beside Ruth, the assistant, who gave my hand a subtle, firm squeeze. Miles began his presentation, his voice steady at first, then growing increasingly strained. He spoke of challenges overcome, of future promise. Then he stopped. The silence grew heavy. He cleared his throat, his eyes finding mine in the crowd. I gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. He looked broken. However, he said, the word echoing in the sound system, true leadership requires acknowledging not just successes, but profound personal failings. He went off script. He confessed to grave errors in judgment regarding family trust matters. He announced his immediate resignation and the appointment of an independent auditor to rectify historical discrepancies in share allocation. He didn't name me, but he didn't have to. The room erupted in chaos. Elara stood and walked out, her spine rigid, never looking back. The board members looked at each other in stunned horror. In the legal and financial whirlwind that followed, the truth emerged. The codicil was invalidated. My shares were returned with damages. The DA, tipped with anonymous evidence, opened an investigation into Miles and Frick. The Vance family, led by a furious and humiliated Genevieve, closed ranks against Miles. Elara filed for divorce. Prescott Ventures, under new management, began the long, painful process of recovery. I sold my returned shares, invested in my studio, and funded a foundation in my parents' name for young artists. I moved to a sun-drenched space in Tribeca, a world away from the cold towers of Midtown. Miles, stripped of everything, lives in a rented apartment in New Jersey. A ghost himself now, awaiting trial. I see Oliver sometimes, under carefully negotiated terms. He calls me Uncle Leo. I stand before a large, empty canvas in my new studio, the smell of potential in the air. The revenge was perfect, cold, and complete. It left no visible scar on the world. Only a fundamental reordering of a stolen universe. But in the quiet moments, I don't feel the thrill of victory. I feel the profound weight of the knowledge it took to get here. The knowledge of how deep betrayal can run. And how far you must go into the dark to reclaim the light. I had to become a ghost, a spy, a manipulator, a reflection of my brother's own cold heart. To defeat him. The recording was the weapon, but the real revenge was the silence that followed its use, the silence where his empire, his marriage, his stolen life once stood. I pick up a brush. I start to paint. Not to restore something old, but to build something new from the ground up with my own hands. The real work, the only revenge that lasts, is the life you build after the war is over.